Thank you very much for inviting me to to this workshop to present about ethnic, gender, and cultural considerations in PROMs and their significance. My name is Giulio Corbelli. I'm a member of the European AIDS Treatment Group, and these are my disclosure. Let me take just 1 minute to introduce myself. I've been diagnosed with HIV in 1997, and since then I've been working as a community journalist, especially in gay media, focusing on sexual health. In 2009, I joined the European AIDS Treatment Group, and that was a great opportunity for me to expand my knowledge about medicine development and clinical research. I also chaired the European Community Advisory Board for some years, which is the body involved in medicine development and clinical research within EATG, mostly involved. So I also represented EATG at EMA since 2016. I'm a member of some research groups and also of the ethics committee at the National Institute of Infectious Diseases in Rome. Now, within these roles, I had the opportunity to know something about PROs, especially as ECAP chair in 2018. We launched a program trying to increase the knowledge among ECAP members about PROs and also establishing a conversation among ourselves, trying to identify those items, those points which are priorities for us to advocate for in PRO. We had some training, also meeting with companies, discussing with them their activities about patient-reported outcomes. And now, last March, EATG launched a specific project on PRO called PROMs, which will develop a framework, a model framework, a working framework for the use of HIV-specific PROMs in HIV research and development, and for the inclusion of people living with HIV in the further development of PROMs. Now, why I'm telling you all of this? This is to say that I am not an expert in technicalities about PROs. So I am sorry, but I will not be able to tell you anything related to the how to ask questions or how to build up a questionnaire, of course. But I'm a person living with HIV. So I know how important my well-being is beyond the viral control. I know how important in the health sector all those areas investigated by PROs, how important they are in our lives. Also, I know the importance of these items in medicine development, so I know how it is important to advocate for their inclusion in medicine development, and to see how better to include them. But last but not least, I am a man, I am white, I live in the EU. Yes, I am gay, but I'm just a gay man. I'm not a trans person. I'm not many other things. Why I'm saying this? Because I don't think that I am the one who should say something about the ethnic consideration, for example, or the gender consideration. I cannot speak on behalf of my trans friends. I cannot speak on behalf of my female friends. I cannot speak on behalf of my black friends and so on, and any other ethnical minority. This is crucial in my view. If we want to have an open conversation about that, we need to ask these questions to the people who are involved in this process, in these problems also sometimes. So the right people should be involved. I can just present my personal consideration, which may be not relevant at all for all of you, which could also be discussed by other colleagues of mine because they may have a different point of view. But we will see this in a minute. Now, the first question that we asked within ECAB while assessing this issue related to PROMs is, do these tools, those that are validated and most used also in HIV research, really answer the question which are relevant to us? I don't think so, and most of my colleagues do not think so. Uh, Many questions that I read in these validated tools are kind of asking something which is not does not capture the reality of my life. My social life is much more complex than asking whether it is perfect, it is slightly changed from the past, it is moderately changed from the past, or severely, extremely changed, like done in the COP, WP, NCA questionnaire. Also, mobility. I have no problems in walking around. I have some problems. I am confined to bed. This is something which might be relevant in the past when people living with HIV were mostly affected by AIDS. But now the reality is much different. So another important issue is these tools, are they developed together with representatives from our communities? If we look at this diagram that shows how the PRO-QOL HIV questionnaire was developed, actually the involvement of people living with HIV was just because someone asked them to fill in a draft of the questionnaire and tell them what they think. I am not sure that this is exactly an example of real involvement. Okay. Also, most used PROs in HIV are quite outdated. They were developed more than 20 years ago. How can they represent the reality of nowadays, the realities of people living with HIV? We need more up-to-date tools. We need also more flexible tools, because if we develop a tool now in 2020, that could be outdated in 2 years, because long-acting treatment are widely available, for example. So we need to be flexible, to find a way to make these tools flexible for the application. The validation process is too long and too cumbersome to allow these tools to be adapted to the reality. Some few slides to answer your real question. I'm sorry if I'm not able to address the question I was asked to address. Now, some ethnic consideration in PROMs. You know much better than me the complexity also of definition of race, ethnicity, and so on. But I just want to tell you something about my personal experience as an advocate related to this issue. Within EATG, we had an open conversation trying to understand whether the use of the term race was appropriate in scientific literature and in scientific research. Our argument was that there is no scientific definition or background for race. We are all equals. There is no genetic difference, for example, to identify races. There is no scientific definition for race. So maybe, we argue, it is good to avoid the use of this term. Maybe we can just use the term ethnicity, which is more related to the community I belong to, or something like that. When we included in this conversation some colleagues living in the US, and especially some black colleagues living in the US, they were kind of not that convinced that this is the right thing to do. Because if we avoid the term race in scientific literature, we risk to erase their identity, a part of their identity, an important part of their identity. So this is not something that we want to do, of course. We want to capture the complexity of the identity of everybody, and all the people. So we should try and identify a way to assess that identity. Of course without being discriminatory, but trying to capture the reality. And this is quite complex because you know much better than me also that race is an aspect of this identity, but is very strictly connected with many other aspects that have to do with the financial, social, educational status of that person. So, and the same applies to me, for example. So, this complex reality should not be identified with just one aspect, for example, race, because it's much more complex. Okay. Gender consideration, another example of a complexity. We started by asking, what is your gender, male or female? Okay, which is very simple. But then we realized that the reality is much more complex. We could identify which gender you identify with, and that's a good way to approach. But most LGBT organizations now agree that the most appropriate way to ask for gender identity to a responder to a questionnaire is by using two questions, as you know. Which gender or sex were you assigned at birth? And which gender do you identify with now? Which one describes you better? Because sex assigned at birth may be different from the one I identify with, of course, as you know, but there are also many other complexities. Now, this is a very simple example of how we need to be very careful when writing a question in a questionnaire, because we want to capture all the complexity of the responders to that questionnaire. But do we need to capture really everything in our surveys? Now, my personal answer to this question is yes, for many reasons. Because if we want to simplify, which is something we do usually in any kind of research, we may miss something important. But, and this is an aspect that you know better than me, but some other aspects are related to how people can feel that they can contribute to your research. So if you ask me to fill in a questionnaire and I read questions that have nothing to do with my experience, with my life, I will just think that you are losing my time, wasting my time, sorry. So it is pretty useless. We should try to involve people, and involving people means involve people since the very beginning. Participatory research is something which is generally it began to be applied in some aspects of clinical research. It should be applied more, but should also be applied in social research. It is very important to develop these tools together with the representatives of the community, taking into consideration that people are very complex and not all people with HIV are similar. Some years ago at the Gay Pride in Rome, I wore this t-shirt, people living with HIV are, and asked people to write an answer on that t-shirt. I collected more than 50 answers, the one different from the other. So the complexity is really high, and we need to take this into consideration if we want to develop tools that are appropriate for our community. Thank you very much for your attention.